Hello, everybody. This is welcome to Monk Chat. This is Tan Jagaro. Welcome you to the official Friday night Monk Chat. I'm delighted to have to my right Tan Wei from Thailand and Venerable Vimala from Belgium. Glad to have both of you here. And I'm going to pretend like I know what I'm doing, so please bear with me. So welcome, and we have several people already making their hellos. Hello to Rick and Kumo. So yeah, this is a time for people to ask questions, any questions they like of the monastics. We can have, and there's also for people here at the monastery as well. We have a number of lay people here. Also is late Goletibly. Manal, Maria.
Let it go, let it be.
Oh, let it go, let it be. Oh, okay. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Maria and Bhumika and Sud, Karuna and Mary. Okay. Yeah. Greetings from everybody. Right.
Well, does anyone here have any questions? First question to the monastery yogis. Okay.
I'll offer one. I was reflecting based on our tea time on renunciation, and I'm just curious about if there's any, and I'll frame a question, but please, anything about the subject would be appreciated. I just wonder if there's any sort of arc to it, meaning so sort of giving up coarse things maybe doesn't feel so hard. But then the things you give up maybe get harder and harder around, certain habits of mind, or I'm just wondering if there's any sort of, I know there's probably not like one common natural arc or anything like that, but anything you can say about sort of the path of renunciation and maybe just with your experience with it, when it's more difficult, less, are there any rhythms at all that you found, or just anything along that topic? Be appreciated. Thank you, Ben.
So maybe I'll just if any of the Venerables is interested in answering the question.
Well, I could say a few things about renunciation, and that's basically that for everybody, it's different what you need to give up. What is easy to give up for one person is difficult to give up for another person. But yeah, you start. Basically, I think with the more material possessions that you're, at least it's a renunciate in this tradition, that you might be attached to. Also, things that define your identity, like hair and things like that. So, and things like makeup and whatever, things that really define your identity. That's also for in our tradition very important to give up. And then slowly you move on to the more more subtle things in your mind, some viewpoints, ideas that you might hold that you completely believe are true, but then you start to question later on, and then at some point you think, oh, okay, that's not. Yeah, that's also just a viewpoint, and that I can give up as well. So I don't know what any of the Venerables want to expand a bit more on that.
I think one thing that's important in the practice of renunciation is if you're fortunate enough to have a good teacher relationship, is to have a teacher who will not indulge your wishes. So one of the important aspect of renunciation is renouncing your likes and your dislikes. Because it can be relatively easy to make up your mind about what to renounce at first, but then having to renounce what somebody else tells you to renounce is much harder. It forces you to renounce things you might not otherwise renounce at all.
I think kind of I echo both of these sentiments from the Venerables. The question is is there a general arc? One thing I think that is quite common in many monastic practices as a junior, like you said, you're kind of entering into a very new world, and kind of asked to renounce often quite a lot of things up front, and then you often get challenged by different things, often related to preferences that we have, or maybe people we want to spend time with or not spend time with, or doing certain kind of practices or not doing certain kind of practices. But one of the things that I think is useful is actually at some point later, like usually at some point later, after your period of dependence, you're maybe given some more freedom, is actually to to continue to revisit this question of renunciation. It's not like there's kind of the sense maybe like an ordination, whether it's an anagaric ordination or a samanera ordination or a bhikkhu ordination. It's like, okay, this is where I renounce. But actually to keep bringing that up. Oh, what is there anything that's kind of obvious that we let go of? Do I have my teacher or otherwise companions, are they either hinting at us at certain things we maybe should examine, or quite explicitly saying, hey, you're holding on to something, or this kind of habit you should look at, and to keep revisiting that. So I think that I've heard, I forget who it was, but I remember one senior teacher remarking that it actually gets harder as you become more senior, because unfortunately there's kind of a tendency in many monastic traditions to kind of only kind of how do I put this, but like only to point out flaws in juniors, as opposed to, and kind of not point this out in seniors, but actually we actually all need this. So if there is a particular thing that's obvious to somebody else, whether you're just starting out in the monastic training or in the beginning, middle, or kind of very senior, it's actually very useful to have all this pointed out. So I think so in that vein, it's always good to keep revisiting this question.
And the mind tends to start picking up new things. You let go of something, and then it picks up something else. Like Ajahn Brahm always jokes that in monastic life, it's like the thing that people start to pick up is food. It's this attachment to food. And that's also something you then have to let go of. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, one more question here.
Well, it's sort of a comment on what you mentioned. About that, you were mentioning how you give up your likes or your wishes, and that's interesting to reflect on. There was a sutta where the Buddha is talking with one of his attendants, and the attendant wants to go meditate in a mango grove or something along those lines, and then they go to meditate in the grove, and then they're assailed by a lot of difficult thoughts. And I often wonder, why was that happening? What was so wrong about going into a mango grove to meditate or something? But maybe it is that once you start opening the door to your likes and your wishes, then more things start coming in and assailing you. Is that how you would interpret that sutta?
Well, I think that's a really interesting point. Yes, in that sutta, it concludes by saying, the Buddha giving the monk an analogy, and he says that it's like your little cat who's trying to cross a deep body of water. But if you're going to cross a deep body of water, you should be an elephant. And he's basically saying he wasn't ready. He didn't have the mental discipline to go off on his own and practice meditation. And this actually is, I think you've teased out something there towards the beginning of the sutta that's of note, that the Buddha originally refuses to allow him to go. He refuses to give him permission, but the monk insists, and so the Buddha eventually lets him. And this is perhaps exactly right, a case of the monk following his own likes and wishes, not being willing to listen to his teacher. And you have to give if you want to really progress, you have to be willing to give up your own ideas about what you should be doing, what you shouldn't be doing. In many cases, this could come up in monasticism, and it turns out that it was really for the monastic's welfare to listen to his teacher or her teacher. So yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, great. Okay. Let's see. First question is from Bhavani. Namaste. How to practice Khanti? comes to mind is become a monastic. You get lots of kanti practice. Okay. Or the Venerable, do you want to add?
Sure.
Mhm.
Well, as a kanti, become a monastic is one way, certainly. There's plenty to endure in monastic life. There's a lot to endure in worldly life as well, of course. How to practice it is, I think, one simple way to practice it is that there are probably multiple ways. One that comes to mind immediately is simply to think of the idea that you're trying to be patient. This actually makes quite a big difference, I think, in terms of initiating this mental state of patience. So if we find ourselves in trying circumstances, if we have the mindfulness to recognize that we might be feeling some aversion to something, and have the mindfulness to recognize that as being unskillful, that is the aversive mental state, and just think, for a moment, I'm going to be patient. This can actually be sufficient to give rise to patience in many circumstances. It makes it surprisingly easier to deal with the circumstances. It initiates quite a light and easy feeling in the heart. It's one idea.
Can I add something
Oh, yeah,
to
please,
that?
please.
Yes. Well, Ayakema always pointed out is this that there's two types of patience, and the patience is of waiting in the future, and the other one's waiting in the present moment. The difference is that quite often we think we're being patient, and we're just waiting for something to happen, to change things, because we don't like where we are right now, and that is not kanti. So if we're aware of this mind state, it's like, is our mind really patient, or is it just trying to really wanting it to change and waiting for it to change? So yeah, I wanted to add that.
I'd like to add one more.
Oh, please,
if I may.
please.
Okay. At a more difficult level of kanti, which is often translated as patient endurance, can be the kind of the brute endurance of a difficult situation, where it's difficult to feel patient, to feel at ease. And one way to sustain oneself in a situation like this is to remember that endurance itself is a skillful quality, and whenever we use it, we develop our quality of endurance. And this in turn is a support for the mind, and it adds strength to the mind. And so whenever we manage to come through a difficult circumstance without breaking our endurance, for example, without giving way to an unskillful mental state or breaking our precepts, then our kanti, our endurance, and our minds will be stronger and will be more capable in the future. So there's a very real reward for keeping our precepts and not giving into unskillful mental states and enduring.
Next question. Dear Bhante, how often should one do Buddha Nusati in one's life? Can Buddha Nusati make one progress on the path, and how far can one go?
Excuse me. Well,
Please.
all right. I like this topic. I want to jump right in. Great questions, all three. Well, and the standard in the monasteries in Thailand is that the monks do Buddha Nusati every morning and every evening as part of the formal morning and evening worship services, and it's recommended for all people, really. In fact, in Thailand, children learn the formal recitation of the Buddha's qualities, the Dhamma's qualities, and the Sangha's qualities in school. And so the standard recollection of the Buddha's good qualities is sort of a national anthem of Buddhism in Thailand. And I personally found it very rewarding to do this practice on a regular basis. So every day, at least a couple of times, recollecting the good qualities of the Buddha and the Dhamma and the Sangha as well. So I can say that at least for the first part. Let's see. Anyone wants to add about the others? Add to that.
I'd just like to add, it's like there's no shoot in like how often should you do it. Just try it out and see how it works for you, and what works best for you. And don't just give up after like 2 sessions or so, but try it for a period of time and then see how it affects your mind.
What was the second question?
The second question is, can Buddha and Sati make one progress on the path? And I'll just simply say yes. And so maybe the other question is, how far can one go with it?
Okay. So yes, the Buddha Nusati is one of the standard 40 kammatthana that handed down to us in the Theravadan tradition, taught by the Buddha himself in the suttas. For example, there's a very prominent sutta in which he teaches this practice to his foremost female lay disciple, Lady Visakha. And he recommends it as one of the practices for her to undertake on the weekly Uposita day. And so it can help you progress on the path. It can take you all the way up into at least one of the stages of jhana. This is systematized in the commentaries. And the Buddha recommends it in situations where, for example, a meditator might be feeling restless and scattered, or conversely, maybe feeling lethargic and lazy, because it helps the mind to gather around this inspiring theme and can liven it up, if you're feeling lazy, or help the mind to focus if you're feeling restless and scattered. And so he recommended to the monks that if you're feeling either of these kinds of mental states, to practice this until you feel piti arising, which is a rapture. This is also one of the bojjhanga factors, the factors of awakening, that sets the stage for deeper levels of calm. And then he said, then transition into doing the 4 foundations of mindfulness practices, forms of meditation, which are directly on the Noble Eightfold Path. So this is just one indication of how far Buddha Nusati can take you.
Very good. Next question. This is from Rick. Venerables, can you describe the experience of transitioning between the 5 faculties to the 5 powers? How does this transition impact our manner of practice? So I hate to give the limelight to you, but this is your talk, Venerable, left from you directly. But we can also chime in if you also want to take a break.
It's okay. I spoke so much about the 5 powers the other night, and so many other topics in the same talk.
Yes.
Well, maybe you can. I wasn't actually there, so I
sorry.
couldn't hear it.
Yes.
Well, you have a fresh perspective.
Yes. So, well, this is an interesting question because, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think probably one of the things from your talk yesterday was that you were noticing that the list of the 5 powers and the 5 faculties were the same. Yeah. And so just to recap, make sure I got this right. So the 5 faculties, 5 powers is saddha, or often translated as kind of faith, the virya, or energy, or kind of effort, sati. Yes, sati is the next one, and or often translated as mindfulness. Samadhi. Samadhi, the next one, was often translated as concentration or stillness, and the last one, of course, being panya, or wisdom or discernment. And so, I guess part of me is I'm a little confused with the question. Is like the transitioning between the 5 faculties and the 5 powers. And that part I'm not really sure about. Maybe you have some insight what Rick is asking about.
Yes,
I wasn't really sure about that.
It was quite an interesting question and a bit of a puzzle about the relationship between the 5 faculties and the 5 powers, and actually being listed in the sutras as having the same factors. Mm-hmm. There's one indication a commentator pointed out, that the powers are considered kind of higher or stronger than the faculties, noting that in the sutras it says that saddha, or faith, is a power of the sotapanna. And it doesn't provide much more information than that. It gives another analogy in the suttas that I mentioned in my talk the other night, that the 5 faculties and the 5 powers are like a single river that parts at an island in the river, and then the river rejoins after the island. I'm not this is not too much clarification.
Yeah, I was also puzzled. I was wondering if you could clarify that.
So I've done some thinking myself on this. Fortunately, I had a conversation with Linda. It was illuminating, actually, also. So thank you, Linda, for broaching the topic after the talk. The faith is a power in the sotapanna. It reminds me that one of the lauded qualities of a Sotapanna, one of the treasures of Sotapanna is saddha, or faith, being faith in the triple gem, that the Buddha is rightly self-awakened, the Dhamma is well taught, and the Sangha is practiced well, and also faith in Kamma. The fourth one is also listed sometimes as being, or indicated as being, that they keep the 5 precepts. They're endowed with the sila that's beloved by the noble ones. And I think that before someone actually travels the path to Sotapanna and goes through the learning stages and actually sees Nibbana for herself, then faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha and Kamma, it doesn't have as much firm grounding. My personal kind of guess, speculation. But then once one has actually seen Nibbana and seen the path, actually walk the path, then they can call upon that faith, and use it as a power in their practice. I think this is probably the meaning. So in times of uncertainty or indecision, they can refer to that and give them some motivation on the path. And I wonder if it's the same with the faculty of energy or effort, that once one has walked the path already and seen Nibbana, they have a clear understanding of which mental states are skillful and which mental states are unskillful. And so the effort, the right effort to reduce unskillful mental states and increase skillful mental states is very is kind of well honed, or the Sotapanna has a good handle on how to use it, and so it's more powerful than someone who hasn't already been so successful in the practice. And perhaps there are similar reflections on the other aspects of the faculty sometimes.
Okay, the next question is Manal. He asks, Dear Venerables, would you please help me understand the Buddhas of the past, present, or future and their respective significance? So this is in the Pali Canon. There are certain places where it talks about the Buddhas of the past. It gives actually a few indications. I think before Gautama the Buddha, I think it talks about, it was a Kassapa, the Buddha was the previous one. And there's a few others that it talks in the Pali Canon. Of course, I think in the Mahayana tradition, there's a lot more Buddhas. I'm very unfamiliar with the Tibetan tradition. There's a lot of Buddhas in that one too.
I'm also very unfamiliar
Yes,
with
yeah. So, but I think the question is more about the kind of the understanding of the past, present, and future and their respective significance. I'm guessing, I'm not sure if that kind of phrasing has a particular significance other than maybe more of like a way of reflecting, right? So, I mean, one of the basic teachings of course, the Gautama the Buddha is that this wasn't while he was able to discover this very unique teachings to Buddhas when he did so as a bodhisattva, this wasn't like unique to him in a kind of a larger sense, that there were other Buddhas before, and that this was more of kind of like what we might call natural law today, kind of like how we might view things like in the kind of scientific realm, right? And so it's I remember one of the things that one of the stories, the Buddha shortly after his enlightenment, he was reflecting on, is there anybody that I can, sort of pay homage to or to bow down to? And he reflected like, oh, there isn't, right? There isn't anybody that's sort of, I forgot how he put it, but basically nobody that's quite worthy. But so he actually paid homage to the Dhamma, right? And this kind of, these principles of how awakening works, how it were the cause and effect relationships of suffering, how it comes to be, how it ends. And then this was actually something that was worthy of homage even for a Buddha. So to me, this is something that that has that kind of this is what is kind of like what's what I'm looking for. Like gives a kind of thread around the Buddha's present and the future. But please, if you'd like to add more.
No, that's such a great answer.
Okay. Yeah, regarding the future, I've heard people say things like, and especially with other traditions, like, oh yeah, I'm not sure how much I want to practice now. I'll wait for the next Buddha, and then I'll really practice. And I'm like, I mean, I heard this kind of said like, I'm like, is that serious? Like, you really think, it's like, like, do you really think your future self, if you're fortunate enough to be reborn in the time of a Buddha, that attitude will, assuming that attitude sort of carries, it's like, you might think, well, this Buddha is great, but maybe I'll wait for the next one,
The chances of meeting Buddha is so slim that if you have a chance to practice, we have to Dhamma now. So if you just practice now.
Yes. Okay. So next question is, okay, I know how to pronounce this person's name. Let it go and let it be. I like this person's name. Okay. Question is it customary to invite a Dhamma talk? How, why, when, etc.? Could it be what Brahma Sahampati was doing, and did the Buddha need to be invited in order to teach? Well, I think there's that the kind of in the many Theravada traditions, there's kind of like that Pali snippet of Brahma Sahampati, right? That's often given by lay people or in the request for a Dhamma talk. So I mean, yes, that is, but I'm not sure if that's what the question was really asking.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get a sense of what the question's asking about?
Well, maybe read it again if you can.
Okay. Is it customary to invite a Dhamma talk? How, why, when, etc.? Could it be what Brahma Sahampati was doing, and did the Buddha need to be invited in order to teach?
Well,
I'm not sure if the question's really getting at. So,
well, in the Ajahn Chah lineage, I think Thai Buddhism in general, it is relatively customary. I mean, there is a custom of inviting a Dhamma talk, requesting a Dhamma talk. And actually, the formal request language actually lists Brahma, or indicates Brahma, as I recall. So it actually recalls this episode from the legend of this teaching career where the Brahma Sampati invites him or implores him to teach. And so this is usually done on relatively formal occasion. Formal meaning, for example, it might be an evening worship service. And then a person usually designated in advance would perform this formal request chant. It has a specific language to it, and so that's how it's done. But some many masters will give a talk spontaneously also. So it isn't that it's necessary. I wonder if this person, this practitioner, let it go, let it be, is the same person who's been asking about Brahma Sahampati recently, and I guess this is this interest in the great Brahma, I think is quite inspiring, and this whole situation. There was somebody asking recently about making the determination to become Brahma Sahampati in a future life and request the Buddha in the future to teach, and I think and this is a kind of determination that many practitioners have undertaken in terms of making the determination either to be a chief disciple of a Buddha, for example, or to be a disciple who attains the greatest mastery of clairvoyance. And for example, I know a monk in Thailand who had undertaken the determination to be the chief disciple of a future Buddha, chief in wisdom, and he is such an amazing monk. He's respected by many of the Kruba Ajahns, and some of the Kruba Ajahns will turn to for advice. Kruba Ajahns being the masters, the enlightened masters, and those that many disciples have great faith in. And he's such a fantastic resource because he's developed so much paramis already on his path. And I think one of the things that's inspiring about this specific one, to aspire to be reborn as Brahma Sahampati, is that it would require excellent developments in the 4 Brahma Viharas, and such excellent qualities: the loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So it's actually something that to some extent, according to the suttas, the Bodhisattva did in a previous life. That's the Gautama Buddha in a previous life. It says in one of the suttas that he lived as a hermit and practiced loving kindness meditation for 7 years, and as a result, when he passed away, he was reborn as the great Brahma 7 times in a row. And then it also had many other fortunate rebirths afterward. So the aspiration to become Brahma Sahampati is the aspiration to develop the Brahma Viharas. They say that Brahma actually has 4 faces, one for each of the Brahma Viharas. And so to develop to aspire to be the Brahma Sahampati is the aspiration to become really a truly wonderful being. So whoever you are out there, I don't know if it was this practitioner who asked this excellent question or another one, but I want to wish you luck in Anumodana.
Very good. Okay, we'll do one more question, then we'll get to the question here. So, Karuna asks, I've had difficulties beginning study of the Abhidhamma, even with cliff notes like Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi or Narada. Do you have other resources to suggest that are more accessible? I am not familiar with the Abhidhamma, so I'm going to pass to the other 2 venerables.
Well, I don't know very much about the Abhidhamma, but I've only studied the Abhidhamma Sangha. So Bhikkhu Bodhi has written a book on that, which I basically see as a sort of summary of the Abhidhamma, and is very helpful if you want to understand that. But further in my tradition, or the tradition that I'm practicing in, it's not really, Abhidhamma is not really consulted. So I can't really say much more about that.
Similarly, ditto.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's a question here. Yes.
I had a question about experiencing the world and for example, like enjoying the sun, for example, that might be on our face on a sunny day. And I'm just calling up some of my notes here. There's the Sutta Majjhima Nikaya 51, where Khandalaka Sutta, where the Buddha mentions when they see a sight with their eyes, they don't get caught up in the features and details. And then he goes on through all of the different different sense stores.
Mm-hmm.
And then they mentioned that he mentions when they have this noble sense restraint, they experience an unsullied bliss inside themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious about this, what this means, getting caught up in the features and details, and if you have any insights into how we can work that recommendation into our daily life, into our daily practice, not to get caught up in features and details. If we're, for example, outside and the sun is on our face, how do we not get caught up in the features and details of that experience?
Yeah. Okay. So sense restraint is a very important part of the path, and you can imagine it's like if you're walking through a shopping mall or something and you see items that you might have desire for, then you start to look at like these items, like, oh, this is really beautiful, and that's like, so that's like what you're doing is picking out those details that you find attractive, and you're disregarding the parts of it that you don't find attractive. So that's like not getting caught up in the features and details of these items. So you don't actually arouse this desire, but you see see more an all-rounded picture of the items, rather than it's like, okay, this is it's kind of nice looking Ferrari, but it's costing a lot. If I have a scratch on it, I'm going to be really nervous, and the whole kind of, so there's a whole lot of negativity about that as well. So you get a bit of a more balanced picture, like, like, well, I don't need this, it's not interesting, and that you can do that with basically anybody, also people you might be attracted to, or because quite often we tend to pick out the beautiful parts of that, or and sometimes people that we don't like, we tend to view them through dark colored glasses, and everything they say we sort of twist into something negative, but that's also not who they are. So you so they don't focus on these small details that are bringing up these negative or negative qualities, either the ill will or the desire. So.
Very good.
I was wondering if I could add to that. I often conceptualizing myself as thinking that I don't want my mind to go out to it, to get to engage with the object. I want the experience to come into me, and I want to, feel the light or the sun, but then I don't want my mind to start, like you said, reaching out to it, because then once my mind starts reaching out to it, I'm starting to create like a conditioned reality around it that is distorted.
Yes, yeah,
Very good.
indeed.
Okay. Next question is from Kumu. Venerables, what are your thoughts about taking happenings from past life regression therapy as some evidence for existence of past lives? Well, first, I don't know what past life regression therapy does. The Venerables know what this?
Yeah, I know what past life regression therapy is, but whether that would be evidence of, I don't know. Usually, past life regression therapy is used if you have a problem that you need to resolve some kind of emotional, mental problem, and then sometimes that can be helpful. So whether that's, you can say that as evidence of past lives, I don't know actually if you can say that.
Maybe I could offer something that might be of interest. The one of the a scholar monk, a Western scholar monk named Analayo, wrote a book on the subject of rebirth. I'm not sure that I can remember the title exactly. I wonder if anyone present here might be familiar with the book and could remember it. But it involved past life regression and
rebirth in early Buddhism and current research.
Very good. Okay. And one of the things, one of the reasons I remember this book is that he takes several documented cases of past life regression, and relates research done into these where people actually went to verify what was recounted in the past life regressions with actual physical evidence from different places. So, and he's quite a reputable monk. He's quite a stringent scholar. And I only skimmed through portions of the book. I was quite struck at the remarkable detail the researchers went into. He also documents a case of a little boy born in Sri Lanka who could spontaneously chant Pali texts. It's a relatively famous case. And he compared the transcripts of his chanting to the actual original text and found a high degree of fidelity in them. So it might be a book of interest if you're on this topic.
But that last is not a past life regression therapy.
I'm sorry?
That last example that
The
you
last
just
example,
is not a past life regression therapy.
Right.
It's
Right.
just a kid that really remembers something from its past life.
Right.
And that's a little bit different.
That's a good point. That's right.
I realized there was actually a bit more of this question I actually cut off in the middle. So it's like that's some evidence of existence of past lives. And the rest of the question is in an indirect way. That was the full question. So sorry, Kuma. I didn't realize there was a second part. And there's a second question to this. I think we roughly answered that.
Yeah.
Could you say the name of the book again?
Oh, yeah. This was from a Venerable Nali, Rebirth in Early Buddhism and Current Research. That's the title of the book.
Is that here at the library?
It is.
Oh, it is.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And if you come to Empty Cloud, you can read it and enjoy. So the next question he asks, there are so many such sessions available on YouTube. For example, people like Dr. Brian Weiss in medicine psychology, ? I'm not, oh. Well, I think on a base, how do you say this? I think we be careful with how we're using terms like what do you mean by evidence? I mean, I think that all these things are suggestive of something, but I wouldn't put this kind of the same kind of evidence as like evidence that would convince like a logician or something like that, or somebody that's that's looking at something very carefully. It would, to me, what these things are more of. These are more of like things that could provoke suggestions. I think there's enough anecdotal stories and events that happen to people that warrant further, study. And actually, I think there are people that are actually trying to find ways of studying this subject in a more rigorous way. And so to me, that actually seems very, that's what it leads to. But in terms of, strong evidence, I'm not sure it would quite qualify for that. Okay, next question. Can you read Thai, Venerable?
I cannot.
Okay. Can you read Thai, Venerable?
Sorry, can
Thai, I think this is Thai, yeah? Right here?
Can I read Thai?
Well,
that
may be
I'm
Burmese.
afraid
Oh, is that
not.
Burmese?
I believe that's Burmese.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't even know what Thai is.
You
It
click
is
show.
Burmese.
Okay, well, see,
Yes.
can you read Burmese?
Oh, that's right.
Oh, there we go.
Pretty good
There we,
translation.
okay. Maybe it's like saying like hello or something.
That's a good question
If
too.
I do an inspect, I might get the.
But by now it might be underneath. Go code.
Okay, it might be somewhere in here. I think we need to move on. I'm not going to find it.
Okay.
Okay.
It's gotta take
Okay.
So we're pretty much just English only, I think.
Maybe
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
turn
So-
the console off so we can see it a bit better.
Okay. Venerables, next question from Manny. Venerables, how do we prepare to be non-reactive to thoughts of aversion and harm that suddenly arise in the mind? I guess there's a couple of things that come to mind around this. Practice. That's the first thing. So if there is a tendency for certain types of thoughts to come up repeatedly, it's a part of meditation. You have some object. So let's say whether it's the breathing or it's some part of the body, or the whole body, or some part of the body, or if it's listening to you. So you're training our minds to use that object as the centerpiece of attention. And then when something else comes to mind, we're training ourselves to not be reactive to that. And if it starts to go off into something else, to try learn skills to bring it back to the main object. So of course, meditation is a good one. But there's another part to this, I think, that comes to mind, and that is also around perhaps I would call the wisdom, or the maybe the kind of might be the sampajanya part, the sati sampajanya, just a little bit of discernment around is it actually appropriate to kind of like just you constantly kind of try to be not reactive to aversion or harm, because if these are coming up a lot, then actually maybe that's actually signaling that the current practice may not be the appropriate for the situation you're in. So, for example, if you're doing, I don't know, kind of meditation practice, and a lot of aversion and harm is coming up with the mind, maybe okay, so maybe at the end of that practice session, you go, okay, reflect, okay, maybe I should actually practice metta now, or I should practice some other brahmavihara, right? Whether it's a sympathetic joy, or compassion, or maybe just like appreciation, something else. Maybe it's also time to maybe just inquire what's just on a really basic level, what's going on here, like so that's what comes to mind. Both we can just doing meditation practice, we're practicing non-reactivity, but it's also important to use wisdom whenever something is repeatedly coming up. Okay, question here.
Yes, wonderful. So I was reading a section of the text in the Buddha's words, and there was it stated how it's very important to respect your elders, parents, teachers, and I've noticed that like within myself when I try to do this, especially with like elders within my family, or even like monastics actually too. I will tend to worry a lot of like if I like of giving like all my best to them, but like Yeah, and sometimes I guess struggle distinguishing what is respect and what and like the limits between like what's kind of like okay in a sense.
Okay.
Mhm.
So for the make sure I understand the question. So the question was around respect, and in particular around respect for one's parents, elders, teachers, but when one is doing this, sometimes there's a worry that comes up, and
Yeah, or like it interferes with my practice in general, like my practice here, like my mind will be elsewhere.
oh,
Like,
okay,
oh, like I have to do that, or I have to do that, or
okay,
to help with this, like for whatever goal I have to help with my parents in the future. Like I'll just tend to like worry about that now, but like that doesn't. I notice that doesn't help either that or my practice.
Right. Okay. So the question again for the if it doesn't come is not if it's not audible, and so it's the situation is that it makes sense. It seems wholesome to develop respect for one's parents or teachers or others. But let's say you come to a monastery or a meditation retreat, and all of a sudden like your mind is like, oh, but my teacher needs this or my parent needs that, and your mind is elsewhere, and actually it's not in the present, it's not with the meditation object, or it's not with you're trying to clean a shelf and get rid of the dust, and you're just doing this with your arm, and then and you're thinking about something else. And so what do we do about this? Did I get
Yes.
okay. Any of the verbals want to have any thoughts about this? Well, go ahead.
No, please
Okay.
do.
One thing that comes to mind is that there are many wholesome, how do you say it? Wholesome, you can say wholesome teachings, wholesome kind of strategies, right? Kind of general principles that are good, wholesome. I would agree. Respect for one's parents, teachers, elders, these are good things. One should, part of what you were saying this, like, actually respect for all beings is really good, actually, because developing that sense of like, so these are like good, like general practices, but you're starting to see that when the mind kind of takes these things and really kind of runs away with them, all of a sudden it actually starts to impact like something you're doing. Like you're mentioning very poignantly that what if like these obsessive thoughts come up during my meditation, I'm not with my meditation object, nor am I actually helping this person who my mind thinks is helping, right? And so that's good because what we're starting to develop is developing a sense of wisdom around how parts of the mind can start to use these principles, right, for their own purposes. So just because like there's a principle doesn't mean like there's an energy behind that, right? There's an energy behind it might be worry, it might be something else, but you're starting to get a sense of like this underlying habit pattern, and that's actually different than the general principle. Does that make sense? There's the principle of respect for one's, let's say, parents or teachers, and then there's the energy that's using that principle as kind of like a tool. It's like, oh, maybe I'll just speak for myself. My mind tends to often go to worry, right? So the worrying mind can pull up all sorts of rationalizations on why it should worry, right? It's like, but somebody might die and somebody might get hurt, or the place might get burned down, and yeah, it can, all these things are true. Like it can pick up all sorts of things. This might, if the wrong thing happens, all of a sudden this computer catch on fire, and then we all start burning, and then we die, and I'm not enlightened yet, and blah blah blah, whatever. But the energy isn't it's nothing to do with the fire or anything like that. The energy is about the worry, right? So there's this habit of worrying, right? So actually getting a sense for the energy behind it and trying to understand like that's deeper. You were trying to kind of get develop a wisdom around, an intuition around what's actually going on here. And then what happens when we start to get a sense of that, what the energy is, the mind will be better able to kind of see itself. It'll be able to catch it sooner, so it doesn't start, and it gets a sense of what's actually what is it actually kind of seeking out? What is it, going for? And so by actually experiencing this, and you're actually firsthand going, wow, this is dukkha. This doesn't make any sense. The other parts of the mind are getting activated now, right? So my encouragement, actually, while it's frustrating, I can tell, all this stuff is frustrating. It's actually using this as fuel for wisdom to try to get the other parts of your mind to go, hey, what do we need to put down? What do we need to let go? What do we need to change? Like how do I relate to this situation differently, right? It's giving you some energy to maybe make some adjustments. And so this what comes to my mind.
I would also like to add on to what I was saying. So then, like, when I try to bring my mind back to, just like right here, right now, then like I'll kind of think like, oh, like I'm afraid of reaping my bad karma for not helping, doing what I could at the time, like, or if it's like too late, and I'm able to do it. So I have that big worry too. Like I'm afraid of reaping the karma. If I don't, not aware of the situation.
Well, when you're here at a monastery, your main job is to be mindful, and that's good karma, to be mindful of all these. So that's actually the karma is what you're doing right now, and so all the kind of rationalizations and all these thoughts, they're doing their thing. They're trying to make a good case, right? But we don't have to necessarily go down there. Yeah. I think you're doing fine. If you're saying this and you're like, hey, I don't want to go, keep at it.
That's the first thing. If you can become aware of this tendency of the mind, rather than just allowing it to continue, and you're not really aware that this is a problem, that doesn't work. And you've already got this understanding, this knowledge that's like, oh, this is what my mind's doing, and this is not really helpful for anyone. So,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Was there two other questions?
This is a related question. Just wanting to dig in a little bit more to that, because I've been having a lot of fear come up, particularly around my own disenchantment, because over the last year and a half in particular, it's felt like a snowball, like just going more rapidly than I kind of anticipated or expected. And it's bringing up a lot of fear in particular because I'm just not interested in the things that I used to be interested in. I'm not interested in the kind of work that I've been doing. I feel like I've just become like just wanting to pull back like quite a bit. And I guess there's a lot of self-thing going on there, but there's just so much fear of like, what am I going to become disenchanted with next? But also like that's the path. And at the same time, it's confusing because there's fear, but then also my mind is becoming a lot happier and like I'm having more wholesome thoughts. And so like there's goodness there too, but it's all kind of mixed in, I guess, uncertainty of the future. And yeah, I don't know, you're talking about that a bit with the Tudong practice as well. And so I was thinking of that.
Okay, so make sure I understand the kind of query. It's so that you've been practicing and noticing that the mind is inclined towards disenchantment more, the kind of thing maybe you're interested in before. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
So what you're also noticing that the mind seems much more wholesome thoughts, much more wholesome states. It also seems to also be kind of I forgot some of the words you used. There was something else that was also coming with that seemed a little less.
It kind kind of oscillates between like a lot of joy in my practice and then also just fear.
Fear. So there's also some fear also coming up.
Yeah, because I'm like, I'm really like, I'm choosing the Dhamma more and more, and that's become the most important thing. But as that's happening, there's also there's like grief, I think, of, just not being the same as I was a year ago.
Yeah. So, any of the venerables want to respond to that?
I think it's a very normal stage to go through, actually, the further you come into your practice. And you become more disenchanted with the things we used to do and the things that would used to give us pleasure, but now they don't give us pleasure anymore, and we start finding new ways. Ajahn Brahm always compares it to going up a ladder. It's like you're holding on to one rung of the ladder, but you don't let go of that one until you've taken the next one. You get more and more pleasure there, but you have to at some point let go. Also, you can't keep on holding on to that bottom rung because it doesn't work. So you have to let that go as well, and just accept that is the reality of it. But it can be. It's also in my own life. I've definitely experienced this kind of like, oh, I don't want to. I'm afraid to let go of this because what is going to happen if I do that? But then when you finally find the courage to let go of it, then it's such a relief, and you go, oh, okay, why didn't I do this before? I have much more pleasure now.
That's really helpful. Yeah, and it feels like it's kind of increasing. Like at first it was small things like, okay, I don't want to watch TV anymore, I don't want to listen to music. And now it's these bigger things of like, I don't want to do this type of work anymore. So yeah, it's like, I don't know how to weave that into the ladder analogy, but yeah.
Just keep on going, keep on practicing, and also to keep on investigating. Is like, what is this? What is this fear? How does that really work inside of me? And investigating it with wisdom.
It's like one more question here, and then we'll go to the questions online. There's a question.
Yeah, I know we're running out of time, but it should just be a quick, like, technical question. In Introduction, composed by Bhikkhu Bodhi, this is just like understanding the etymology, rather. He decides to define Lokiya as mundane and Lokutara as world transcending. I just wanted to understand like why he chose those words, and just basically once again breaking down the etymology of like both words as to why he chose that.
So the question is around the etymology of two words that Bhikkhu Bodhi translated.
Lokiya and
Lokutara.
And he defines Lokiya as mundane, and he defines Lokutara as world transcending.
So Bhikkhu Bodhi translated Lokiya as mundane and Lokutara as world transcending.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys would know anything about that meaning in terms of this. Yeah, maybe a question for Bhante Siddhasa. Yeah.
Bhante Siddhasa,
I wasn't sure if any of you guys.
Yeah, he's great. Every time Bhante Siddhasa gets I remember like one of his Dhamma talks here, he was translating, I forgot what it was. I think it was the Satipatthana Sutta, and you could tell like he was just so much interesting, exciting. It was like really like I really enjoyed it because you're really feeding off of the interest, right? He really loves Pali in the translation.
Yeah.
So he's the one to ask. Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn over the question.
Okay, so let's go to some online questions, and we'll come back to questions here. Okay, let's see. Happy. Great, that's a great name. Happy asks, what is the difference between cultivation and development of Dhamma gradually? You want to try to, like, what's the difference between cultivating the Dhamma and developing the Dhamma? Initially, I would just say they're synonyms.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was my initial thought as well. I don't see.
So maybe if we ask if they can put in some more clarification or something.
Yes.
Yeah, Happy.
This might be different.
Yeah, Happy. Please send us your clarification. Rick asks, Venerables, can you share a few experiences in your monastic training that were especially inspiring? Thank you. go first. You know, I mean, I might have shared this story already. I know I shared with at least a few people in the monastery, but just recently, I mean, it just popped in my mind. Is actually it was about a month, almost 2 months ago, a month and a half ago or something. I was my previous visit to Empty Cloud. I was almost around a local supermarket, and there was this woman that was passes by, and she was walking slowly. It looked like she had some health problems, and she went in the store for a while and came back out, and she was carrying basically like some like a box of lettuce and a bag with a couple of bell peppers in it. And she saw us again, and she kind of looked at us and then stopped and then turned around and walked back inside. Of course, she was doing this slowly, and I kind of didn't really know what was going on. There's a lot of this that happens when you're outside a store. People are coming and going. And then she came out later, and she actually had some dollar bills in her hand. She actually was coming up to give us something. So she didn't say anything to us. She was able to kind of discern that, we're out there or doing something, and said maybe we needed something. And I looked at her and I said, well, thank you very much. We actually can't accept, money. It's not part of our tradition. And she actually had a very disappointed face, and so I said, please, that was a very, very kind gesture. Can we do some chanting for you? And so actually we did. So a customary thing when Buddhist monks receive food is we do what's called Anumona chant. And so me and someone in Mexico were out there. We did some chanting for her. And then afterwards, I used to have my eyes closed with this, and I afterwards opened my eyes, and I could tell like she was like quite moved by this, right? And also like I started to understand, like I tried to talk to her a little more. She couldn't talk. I think she was mute, so she can hear and kind of understand what I was saying, but she couldn't say anything. She just but she turned around, she started to walk away, and then she stopped, and then she turned around, and she opened the bag that had the 2 bell peppers, and she took 1 bell pepper and put one in my bowl, and took the other bell pepper and put in someone in Ratiko's bowl. And to me, that was like one of, and then of course she walked away and didn't say anything. To me, that was such a beautiful thing to see and be witness to that. It's like I was telling whoever I was telling me in the monastery about that story, is like, I don't think I'll ever forget that story. I guess now because it's on YouTube, I'll never forget you forgot. But I could drown the noise of all this gobbledygook of stuff that's getting. I mean, like, what was it like? Does anybody know the statistic of the number of like data, the amount of data that gets uploaded every day? It's like ridiculous. I forgot what the number was. It's just some ridiculous number. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, so to me that was like really inspiring, just because it was like, yeah, this was such a heartfelt gesture. And it was just so genuine. You just couldn't deny. This was just so genuine. Donna, like, so beautiful. So I wish I knew her name. Yeah.
I have a story. Okay.
Yes.
This is. I wish Monte Sudas were here, because this is about his preceptor doing something I found very inspiring.
My preceptor too. Yeah.
Luang Por Pasano is also your preceptor. Excellent. All right. Good. Luang Por Pasano at Abhayagiri Monastery, has since retired from the abbotship, was the abbot of Ba Nanachat in Thailand before. And I was an anagarika at Abhayagiri Monastery in California, where he was the abbot at the time. And he'd had a cold for several days and been coughing. Sometimes it was pretty strong. He was coughing pretty strongly. And the night came for the one of the regular Dhamma talks during each week, and he actually it probably is, there's a regular kind of rotation, and so he went up to give the Dhamma talk in front of the sangha of monks and the lay people who are gathered there, and he gave the talk even though he had a cough, and it was. I remember thinking it was. I always loved Luang Por Pasano's Dhamma talks in general. But it really struck me that even though he was suffering with his cold, he went and gave the talk also, and I thought it was quite a display of fulfilling one's duties, And as an anagarika, I was one of the people who would drive the monastery vehicles for the sangha. And it was the tradition that after Luang Por would give a Dhamma talk, we would offer to give him a ride up to his dwelling, his cabin up in the woods. It was probably a mile from the ordination hall at a very steep grade. The monastery is on the side of a mountain. And so I after the Dhamma talk, I quickly rushed out to the vehicle and to the truck and brought it up to the doors of the sala. And I went in to invite Luang Por to accept a ride, as usual. And I didn't see him, and I asked around, and the monks who were still there said, actually, Luang Por went out the door as soon as he was done, and he went right up the mountain to his kuti. And I was so surprised. I looked up the mountain, you could see it was during the winter, and it was the wind was really blowing. And the tree limbs were bending in the wind. And I thought, Luang Por Pasano was over 60 years old already. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and he had a cold and just given a Dhamma talk. And he decided to walk up that mountain and not take the regular ride. And I was so impressed by that he was willing to put forth so much effort and to develop his effort parami in that way.
This is down the cloister area?
That's right.
Oh, this is more than a mile.
More than a
yeah,
mile.
It is more than a mile. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is, gosh. It's pretty far away. Yeah.
It was quite a walk.
Yeah. I mean, usually, kind of the closest kuti in the upper level, it would take me at least a half an hour. But I'm a slowish walker, and then the further kutis were like 45 minutes an hour.
Wow.
And you may have been faster.
I
but
think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty far.
It's very steep.
Very
steep
steep.
trail.
Yeah, I was thinking that there's so many little stories that are very inspiring. Pindapata is definitely quite often one of them. That's why I love going on Pindapata. But one thing that happened to me fairly recently, so I'll talk about that, is I was in a small Dhamma center in the mountains. I'd come there with we only basically have our little tudong bag and the clothes we have on, basically a few extra things, and sandals. And sandals are not always so suitable for mountains, especially if you have to climb quite distances. So soon the people there figured that my shoes were not really up to doing the job of going to the caves that were up in the mountains and staying there. And so everybody sort of got together and raised money to buy me some proper approach shoes. And also to the lady next door lived in a trailer, and she happened to have my same size as me, apparently, and she immediately came with her shoes, with her walking shoes, to offer those to me to use until the shoes arrived. So I went off and stayed in a cave, and at the end of the week, somewhere, and that was 5 hours walk from the center, so it's quite a long way. And at the end of the week, the manager of the center came just to deliver my shoes to me 5 hours down the track, and to bring us also to another cave. And then he decided that even though we were going back to the center that evening, because we were in the habit of doing that every week, to come together to discuss Dhamma. And he decided, I'm going to just stay in this cave for the night, and I'll come tomorrow morning. And so then we met up again the next day for the Dhamma talk. And then when I went back out to the cave, he had top the water, like it's a big big gallon kind of thing with water he brought all the way from down in the valley, which is quite a long way up, and firewood and everything. So everything was there for me as well. So it was incredibly sweet and inspiring that they would go through so much effort to give me this experience of staying in these caves. So I felt very, very grateful for that.
Okay, next question is from Sud. Dear Venerables, I have recently taken up the practice of doing everything with metta, but I found that I still have a lot of anger. I cannot do complete justice to my intention. Do you have any advice on how to practice metta in all my actions without tainting it with problems that probably are arising due to my past experiences and karma? So, wow.
Keep practicing.
Mhm.
You get better as you go along.
So one thing that comes to mind, because you're practicing metta, you're so very, very angry. It's interesting. It's a bit of a side, but I think this might help. So I was talking with somebody here. There's about the practice. It was actually on the practice of lust, and they were saying, there are classical things of not to do when lust arises in the mind. For example, he was saying metta. You should never do metta when there's lust arising. And I said, well, actually, sometimes for me, I actually found that metta actually does help. And he's like, what? And so I didn't elaborate too much about it, but the point of practice is to try these things, right? There's a reason why one shouldn't do metta when lust arises in the minds, but one finds that perhaps, and so the reason I bring this up is that maybe like there's something going on with this anger, right? Where whatever is driving this, where the energy is, that maybe metta isn't maybe the best sort of approach. Again, I would also look at some of the other Brahma Viharas, right? Consider compassion or a kind of joy for kind of welfare or goodness or success of others, or just a general appreciation, right? Contentment. So try out different things other than metta. Or even try things that may even seem like kind of very. I know some people, they have a lot of benefit from, like, for example, elements contemplation or asubha contemplation with regards to anger, right? So that's why I'm kind of bringing this up. Maybe this is time to start playing around with some of the other practices.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, please.
What I find very helpful in these cases is like when you have anger coming up, you tend to like go in your head and get overwhelmed by the anger and especially think about the objects outside of yourself rather than the anger itself. And I find it very much more helpful to look inside the body and at the feelings that might come up. And where do you feel that anger inside your body? And then you can have a little bit more of a distance to it, and to stay with that, with this mindfulness and loving kindness, with metta towards that, and towards these feelings. There's these physical feelings in the body, and that tends to diminish it quite well. At least for me, that has been very, very helpful.
There's one other thing that came up, and it's worth mentioning over and over. Try to be honest with oneself. Are you doing this practice to get rid of the anger? Really try to be honest with yourself about that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can take some questions here. Yes. Yeah.
I had a question. So I sometimes realize that when there's some desires that come up in the mind, sometimes I'll tend to feed it and just ignore the fact that I should just like let it go and bring my mind back to reality. So what are your recommendations and like micro recommendations into changing that? instead of feeding it, because like I'm experiencing this like restlessness in the mind as I'm doing this, but I'm also kind of somewhat conscious but also unconscious of it. That like I recognize that it's just so much of a habit, kind of. That's like, oh, if I want that now, I want to finally get it.
So the question is, so there's a lot of restlessness that's coming up in the mind, and you said feeding it. I didn't quite understand what you mean by
So
feeding.
like there's like certain desires that come up,
Uh-huh.
and then I tend to feed on it, like just mindfully.
You know, it's like you're kind of being mindful, but you're also kind of indulging the restlessness too. And so, like, what can you do about when you're? I see. Okay.
Sure. Let's see. Maybe one thing I can offer, one idea. Of course, it depends on the setting and so on, but and the situation. But I think one thing that can work pretty well for me is kind of grounding oneself, imagining the heart, you know, here in the chest, you kind of your spiritual heart, you know, your mind, here in the chest, and kind of allowing it to relax back to its natural place, and grounding yourself in the heart and in the body, recognizing that this is all that's really here is just the heart and the body. This kind of a grounding process, and very very calming and kind of stabilizing. It's also quite pleasant too. And so this is something that the heart is naturally looking for. We're all really looking for pleasure and trying to avoid pain. And if we can find some pleasure in this place and home, you know, in this grounding, then this will have a tendency to reduce the mind's restlessness. Won't go looking for it so much outside, I think.
Any other questions and residents? Okay, let's take a few more that are online. Let's see.
I want to ask.
Sorry.
Pardon me, sorry.
Yeah.
I want to ask about time. It's
Yes.
Almost 8:50 now.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
Okay, we go to 9.
Yeah, we got to 9. Yeah. So let's see. We missed this one. Sorry. Happy. Silence and smiles is the Buddha's way of experiencing living in this world. Am I correct?
I didn't get that.
I think there's a one before that actually.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Oh,
Okay. Okay.
I don't know if there's any more.
Oh,
before
man,
it,
did I miss? Did I totally like miss? No. Okay. Yeah, that was the next one. That was the one we just answered.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Happy asks, for conventional working people, is all the 5 precepts important? If I keep 4 precepts, is that okay? Thanks, all teachers.
It's a very common question, right?
Happy, practice the 5 precepts.
Well, I can answer that. Actually, when Tenzin Palmo you do very famous Tibetan now bhikshuni, at the time when she started as a junior nun, her preceptor gave her only one precept or one precept to keep first of all, and then she progressed to more later on. So, but yeah, you can also ask yourself why do you not want to keep that 5th one? What's going on there? What's under the underlying tendency to not want to do that? And look at that with wisdom and see if that's maybe also something that's actually good for you to keep that one.
You also can write in and ask us about a particular precept. We could comment in particular if they're.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. 4 precepts is better than 0. So, you know, it is worth. It's one of the things that the Buddha encouraged us to do was actually reflect on our goodness. So if we are keeping precepts, you know, let's say we were keeping 4, it's actually to recollect, oh yeah, I'm keeping this precept, I'm keeping that precept, to really consciously do this and repeatedly, just like a meditation practice. So Happy then followed this up and said, silence and smiles is the Buddha's way of experiencing living in the world. Am I correct? And this is the one I was puzzled by. Silence and smiles is basically, is silence, or are silence and smiles the way that the Buddha is a Buddha's experiential way of experiential living in the world. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That the Buddha's experience after attaining enlightenment, he experienced life in a smiling way, in a silent way.
Mm.
Okay. He was all smiles throughout the rest of his life. And quiet, probably quiet and silent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Interesting. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
What do you think? How do we answer?
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that, but yeah, I like the way you put it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand the question.
Okay, I'm not sure if that's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind, I like it on one sense, but it's also, I think it also, we don't want to kind of downplay the discovery of the Buddha, right? It's more than just being quiet and smiling. And I think that's it, so the Buddha's deep understanding of dukkha and the way out of dukkha, that is really profound. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's great because he also taught quite a bit, and so there was silence. There were times when he could be silent for long periods of time at a time, according to the sutras that we have. There are also times when he did quite a bit of teaching, and he might be surrounded by many people for long periods. But he had apparently he had the discernment to know when was the right time to be silent, when was the right time to speak. So yeah, kind of dovetailing with what you said, this wisdom, this discernment. In terms of smiling, there are times when he smiles in the sutras, and the person who's with him, like Ananda, he would often say, Tathagatas smile for a reason; they don't smile without a reason. And so he often would teach Ananda about something on those occasions. But he also experienced kinds of pleasures that were kind of beyond smiling, even higher spiritual pleasures than things like happiness, as he taught his disciples. And so I guess it's something I find very inspiring as well.
I can assure you, he probably wasn't smiling when he was correcting his naughty bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. If you're ever curious, you can look at some of the monastic manuals and find all sorts of interesting stories. So I can assure you he wasn't smiling.
Lumpur Nun had a story. I wonder if I could tell.
Sure.
In relation to Lumpur Cha, Ajahn Cha, he said that Ajahn Cha in his later years had false teeth, and he would use them to good effect. He was very skillful with his teeth, because when he wanted to look fierce, he'd have his teeth in, and he could look really fierce. But when he wanted to look softer, he would take them out, and he looked very grandmotherly. He said so. So probably the Buddha had this kind of discernment too.
We have to have a look at how many questions there are.
Sure.
So,
Oh yeah, we have quite a few questions, maybe, and we only have 5 minutes. So we'll try to answer as many as we can, and then the rest, maybe for those who did submit questions, maybe at another monk chat next week, or at is there any other time people can ask questions? Kind of.
I can come here.
Yeah, come to Empty Cloud. Yeah. So we'll answer as many questions as we can, and then we'll move on. So next question is from Karuna. Venerable Vimala, Tellurian?
It's in our monastery.
Tellurian seems like such a wonderful place. Is there anything you'd like to share share with us about it? I'd be so grateful, i.e. the community. What's it like to practice there, or anything? Very excited. P.S. I'm coming to your teaching in Mahan tomorrow.
Okay.
So yeah, please.
Very nice. I'll see you tomorrow then. But okay, yeah. What can I say? It's a bit different from Empty Cloud, which is also a very wonderful place to practice. It's much smaller and a bit more quiet in forests. So we practice a bit more in solitude quite often. Gosh, what can I say about that? You're very welcome to come if you come to Europe.
Great. Let's go to the next question. Venerables, how does a Catholic follow the Dhamma as they do the Bible? Well, you read the Bible, you read the Pali Canon, and come to a monastery, and yeah, just come, investigate, read, listen to Dhamma talks. Good. Okay, next question. Happy. How the Buddha do the paradigm shift from existential to experiential actually? How to apply paradigm shift on myself? I don't.
Can I ask for the question again?
Yeah, I'll read it again. How the Buddha do the paradigm shift from existential to experiential actually? How to apply paradigm shift on myself? I think maybe they're asking like how to practice from and like actually make it real. Maybe is that what's
yeah.
getting at?
Well, yeah, I think this is going from not just being theoretical to being real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's the whole path. The whole Noble Eightfold Path is exactly about gaining this experiential knowledge and understanding of the Dhamma. Because yeah, you can have like know everything from books, but that's not really going to get you any further. You have to do what suttas point to. Then you, yeah. So it's a very broad question. You can have talk about that for hours, but for which we don't have time.
Yes.
But yeah, it's basically the whole Noble Eightfold Path in my.
I'll say this much: if you're stuck, get out of the house or do something different physically.
That's great.
Yes.
In regard to the Buddha's career, he in his last life, in which he attained enlightenment, he was, according to the story, he was secluded by his parents so that he wouldn't see suffering. Then he experienced world weariness after seeing suffering, old age, disease, and death. And this is what spurred him on to go forth into homelessness and try to seek enlightenment. This is a teaching in the suttas that when we experience suffering, we either will seek a remedy for the suffering, or we'll just kind of like freak out. And so if we turn the teachings to use the teachings to look at our own lives and contemplate the fact that we're all suffering to old age, disease, and death, and that we're the owners of our karma, our action, this over time, I think, will spur any of us on to try to do things to relieve our suffering in these ways.
Okay, we'll do one more question. Is maybe hard to answer in a couple minutes, but we'll do it the best we can, and we can go a little bit longer too. Shadow of Label asks, how does one deal with the negative energy with being non-reactive, as in the pain felt when not replying to a hurtful person? That's a good question. So basically, like somebody is being hurtful, it could either be in voice or maybe even physically, and then there's going to be pain that arises. How do we be non-reactive to the situation, and how do we deal with the negative energy that we're feeling?
Where can you feel that energy resonate, that these emotions resonating in your body? And I always come back to that, because for me that's been extremely helpful, and to stay with that, with this loving kindness, and give yourself that loving, or that part of you, or that part of this phenomena that you call you, give that some loving kindness, and especially quite often we just start to think about these things and make this whole story in our head, that constantly thinking about it, and that's not very helpful. So staying with these feelings in the body, and staying with that, with this love and kindness is
one just practical bit of advice: if this is somebody in your life that is a reoccurring person, in other words, it's not just somebody you meet on the street once and you never see again, seeing how you can practically limit the time you spend with this person. So if it's a family member or a friend, just consciously saying, okay, how do I put a limit on the amount of time? Because if it's something like, I get the impression there's something like quite challenging and difficult. Okay, it's challenging and difficult. You don't need to make it, so difficult. Try to kind of minimize that window and practice with that, right?
And setting boundaries is an act of compassion as well, for yourself and for others.
Okay, so it's 9:01, not too bad. We'll say goodbye to our friends online and here at the monastery. I guess we normally do 3 sadhus. Is that okay? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.